In My Hero Academia Heroes Rising, we see what a potential Bakugo with One for All looks like, and that got me thinking about what would happen if Deku and Bakugo fused. So I spent an unhealthy amount of time making this video. So if you enjoy it, please leave a like for my sanity. This all starts off when Deku and Bakugo are kids. See, they would be playing and Deku would ask Bakugo for a marker, and Bakugo would say, "Come on Deku, you gotta be more prepared," handing it to him as Izuku touches Bakugo's hand and a light engulfs the classroom. Then, from the spot where Deku and Bakugo were standing, would be somebody completely different that looks just like the both of them at the same time. And I'm sure you guys are probably wondering, okay Xehther, how do they fuse? Well, at first I was thinking I was going to use Potara fusion or maybe Metamorphin fusion, but then I decided, hey, quirks are a thing, let's just give Deku a fusion quirk. So yeah, that's how, in case you're wondering. Anyways, immediately the class goes into chaos and Mitsuki and Inko are immediately called to the school, rushing in as they would take the new boy to the hospital, where they're told that Deku and Bakugo fused and became a completely different person, to just get used to it and to figure out what's gonna happen on their own. As Inko and Mitsuki would argue about who he's gonna stay with, when suddenly the fusion yells out, "Stop! I've been here for 30 minutes and I haven't even gotten to get a word out. You two have been arguing like rabid dogs this whole time." As from here he would say, "I don't even know what my name is." Suddenly, Inko and Mitsuki calm down and the fusion says, "Let's see, my name, what should it be? What about Bazooka?" As Inko says, "Sweetie, maybe pick another name." And he says, "Fine, what about Bakugo?" Not being able to complete his sentence, as he then says, "Fine, how about Midori?" Not being able to finish that one either, when suddenly both moms say that a mix of their last names would actually be kind of cool. And so they named the fusion Katsuya. As from here, Inko and Mitsuki decide that they're gonna need to share him 3 days each, deciding that on Sundays the families are gonna get together. As from here, Katsuya would have to deal with the co-parenting from both families, and he would be informed of the fact that his quirk has developed drastically. Since they fused, it ended up growing about 10 times stronger, and their body is gonna have to do some getting used to it, so try not to use their quirk, the doctor would say. As Katsuya would say that it's no problem, he'll just have to train 10 times as hard. As from here, they go to Mitsuki's house, followed by a 10-year time skip to the sludge villain incident, which Katsuya is absolutely not ready for. His whole life is about to be flipped on its head again. And after class, he would end up taking a shortcut, the same path that Deku takes in the original, leading him to bump into the sludge villain, and it would try to attack him, but using their explosion quirk, they would fly up into the air and stay completely out of its reach, as All Might suddenly arrives and using a Texas Smash obliterates it, as Katsuya rushes All Might in excitement, begging for an autograph, as All Might laughs and gives them one, and he praises them on surviving the villain for so long, when suddenly his quirk gives out and he finds himself having to explain his time limit to the fusion. As from here, Katsuya laughs, saying they understand, and All Might asks, "What school are you going to, young man?" As Katsuya smiles and says, "I'm gonna go to UA," as All Might would say, "Perfect, meet me at Dagoma Beach next morning for some training. I see a lot of potential in you, young man." As from here, Katsuya would nod like 100 times and say he wouldn't miss it for the world, agreeing to meeting All Might there at 5 AM, rushing home to tell Inko everything over dinner. The next day, he arrives to train, and All Might explains how it's going to be going down, telling him about One for All and how he thinks he just might be his successor, asking him to show off a bit of his quirk. As from here, Katsuya goes on to shoot a full power explosion into the sea, blowing All Might away. As from here, he tells him he's perfect, just what he's looking for, and in All Might fashion goes on to hand off One for All to Katsuya. From here, he absorbs it, and about 1 hour later, he goes on to ask All Might why he doesn't feel any different. And from here, All Might goes on to explain to them how to use One for All, as they squeeze their butt cheeks and from the depths of their heart yell "Smash!" as they shoot a 100% smash, causing a tsunami to hit an uninhabited island, as they are shocked and realize that they broke their arm. from here, they rush to meet Recovery Girl, and she scolds Toshinori, saying he could have taught them restraint, but after Katsuya's arm is healed, that's the last thing on his mind, seeing as he's back to square one of not being able to control his quirk, and so he gets to training 10 times harder, as from here, over the course of the 10 months, he'd reach an impressive 45% full cowling, and not only that, but discover One For All's secret quirks and the vestiges inside of One For All. So Katsuya has explosions, One For All, float, smoke screen, danger sense, black whip, and even Fa Jin. This new character is quite busted to say the least, and he hasn't even taken the entrance exam yet, so good luck to any villain in this story. But like I said, he still hasn't taken the test, so that's exactly what we're going to be covering next. Skipping past the test, which obviously he passes, and now we just go directly to the moment when Izuku begins to fight the robots. And let's just say that me talking about how he fights them is not half as entertaining as seeing it, so here's 10 seconds of Katsuya destroying robots.
Get him up, let him get up, let him get up, let him get up.
Fight back! Fight back! Fight back!
After Katsuya's rampage on the robots, the zero-pointer would finally be thrown into the equation, and let's just say Katsuya loves a good challenge, so seeing Uraraka underneath the rubble, Katsuya would blitz in at the robot and send it flying back like in canon, only to then land by Uraraka and ask if she's okay, taking her to Recovery Girl as she tells Katsuya that he's come quite far since he was in her office, and Katsuya laughs going home to Mitsuki's, where he would spend the next 2 days, and eventually his letter would arrive, as obviously he's told that he made it into UA. So, after this would happen, Katsuya would make his way towards his first day of school, and upon seeing Mr. Aizawa in his sleeping bag, trying to get some shut-eye, Katsuya decides to just stay quiet, as from here, Aizawa wakes up and would go on to tell everybody to get dressed for the quirk apprehension test, as they do so, and let's just say Katsuya pulls a one-punch man, getting first place easily, shocking the classroom and putting himself on Todoroki's watch since my boy's feeling some type of way after seeing someone stronger than him. Moving on though, we flash forward a bit to the day of the heroes versus villains training. Now, obviously with no Deku versus Bakugo, the event changes drastically. I mean, who's he gonna fight? But that's where Spin the Wheel comes in, for situations just like this. Alright, let's see who's Deku's teammate's gonna be. I wonder who it's gonna be, honestly, I'm kinda curious. Koda? Mina. Okay, Mina's a pretty good choice. Not bad. She won't get in his way. He's gonna be going up against Shoji. That's not bad either. And then his final opponent is gonna be... Come on, give me the eye pick. Yes, sir, Todoroki. After the match is announced, Izuku and Mina prepare. And let's just say Shoji and Todoroki are not ready for the massacre to come, in the form of a fusion. As soon as the match is announced, Katsuya using float would rise to the window Todoroki's in and grab him and send him flying out the window, as Todoroki would stop himself using his ice, but seeing this, Katsuya smirks and blasts a massive explosion, causing a hole in the building wall as he would blitz in at Todoroki using One For All and punches him in the gut, then turning towards Shoji says, "Give up," as Shoji puts his hands up and All Might would call the match. Class 1A would be in shock, and after this, Todoroki would get up and give Deku a death stare as he walks away, and Katsuya feels kinda bad, thinking, maybe I did take it a bit too far. But the next day in class, they're given permission slips and told to sign them, and of course, they do, leading to the USJ event, aka the villain attack. So once the students get off the bus, 13 would go on to give her an annoying speech as Kurogiri would arrive and teleport tons of villains in, as Deku would be confused about whether it's real villains or fake villains, but once he gets teleported away, he realizes very quickly the answer. So once he gets saved by Froppy, he lunges in the air using float and shoots a smash into the water, as from here, he then makes his way to Aizawa and provides some much needed assistance, and once he arrives, he proceeds to body these villains, left and right using his quirks, as Shigaraki gets mad and calls for the Nomu. It would then come in flying in and attack Katsuya, but unfortunately for it, Katsuya is way past the Nomu's level, so he gives it a good spanking and proceeds to give it the old Team Rocket treatment, as Shigaraki is left speechless, and Katsuya says he bit off a bit more than he could chew, as from here he goes on to punch Shigaraki in the face, sending him flying, as Kurogiri would try to step in, but Katsuya, using his explosion quirk, flies in and holds him down until All Might and the heroes arrive and take down the rest, locking up Shigaraki and Kurogiri, taking those two nuisances out of the way earlier than it would have happened in the real My Hero Academia story. But after this happens, the news would go crazy about a student who defeated villains, basically single-handedly, and the world would be going nuts about the next big thing since All Might. So tickets for the UA Sports Festival sell like hotcakes, and so we jump straight into just that, with Katsuya giving a big speech, hyping everyone up and getting the crowd pumped up for the first event, the race, which Katsuya kinda clears easily, and after this would come the cavalry battle. And just like in canon, Katsuya gets Uraraka, Mei Hatsume, and Tokiyami on his team, just like he does in the original. But with the fact that he has Black Whip and Float, he's able to do what he did in the manga, holding his teammates up into the air, keeping his distance from the opponents, causing Todoroki to not be able to actually even try to take his headband, and so we then skip to the 1v1 battles, in which Katsuya would end up having to face off against Shinso. And since there's absolutely no way that Katsuya doesn't say anything back to Shinso, since he does have Bakugo's temper after all, when Shinso would insult Katsuya, he wouldn't be able to stay quiet and would end up getting caught in mind control. But what Shinso wasn't expecting was for Katsuya to have main character plot armor. And so once he's able to snap out of it due to the vestiges, he blitzes Shinso and 1-inch punches him off the ring. As from here, he goes on to congratulate him for his efforts and tells him he'll be sure to put in a good word for him to get him into the UA hero course. As from here, round 2 would start, and it would be Katsuya versus Kirishima, in which this would serve more as an exhibition show, considering Katsuya is able to actually let loose a bit and show off his skill set, shocking the crowd and obliterating Kirishima. But after this, we get the finals, which would be Todoroki versus Katsuya. And I'm pretty sure we all know the outcome of this, but there's no reason for me not to cover it. So the match starts with a gigantic iceberg launched at Katsuya that he would blow up and go on to blitz in, using One for All to punch Todoroki into the air and grab him using Black Whip as he creates an explosion in his palm, flips Todoroki around, and proceeds to end this man's career live in front of millions, with it hurting so bad even Endeavor felt it. But after this, the medals are awarded by All Might, and Mitsuki, Inko, and their dads would go out to celebrate the victory. As we skip to the next day in school when the students would pick their hero names, and Katsuya would pick the hero name Flashy Hero, Bazooka. It's kind of funny considering that it pays homage to Izuku and Bakugo's real names, so I'ma stick with it. But after this, he has to pick who he'll be interning with, and All Might, like usual, suggests Gran Torino, so Izuku goes with him to train, but there is a small, teeny tiny detail that I forgot to mention. Katsuya already knows Gran Torino, and you might be like, what? Why would you not tell us this? And the short answer is, I forgot. But hear me out. He would meet him just based off the fact that he had 10 months to train, and All Might was struggling teaching Katsuya to use One for All. So he ends up asking Gran Torino for help, and that's how they would have ended up meeting each other. So when Katsuya arrives, Gran Torino tries to attack Katsuya, but he dodges and say, come on old man, you know that trick doesn't work on me, you gotta be faster than that. As from here, Izuku grabs Gran Torino and he laughs, telling him he can't wait to see what he'll look like in another 2 years. And then they get down to training, in hand-to-hand combat and even situational scenarios. But eventually the day of the Hosu attack would come into play and nothing happens, because Shigaraki is in jail, so that means no Nomus, no Hosu attack, and without the Nomus to alert Gran Torino and Deku about Ida's situation, Ida either dies or gets paralyzed, and we're gonna go with the family-friendly option. As from here, we skip over the rescue training race, and even the written test of the finals to cover the meat and potatoes of this segment, All Might versus Katsuya and Todoroki, Why? Because they don't like each other and would get in each other's ways. But ultimately, I can see Katsuya leveling with Todoroki, and they were able to get past their differences, leading to Todoroki creating a massive dome of ice around them, and Izuku lunges in at All Might, fighting him on even grounds, as midway through the fight, Todoroki escapes, and they catch the dub. And even the people in class would be shocked at the fact that All Might and Izuku were fighting each other, saying that obviously All Might was holding back, but what they don't know is that All Might wasn't the one holding back. It was Katsuya, and he did it to preserve the image of the #1 hero, All Might. After this, we have the Forest Training Camp arc, but seeing as Kurogiri and Shigaraki are out of the picture, it should be called filler because nothing happens, and we just skip to the Provisional Hero License arc, which also gets glazed over because there's no stakes here. I mean, of course Katsuya passes. So now, all that's left is the Overhaul arc, starting with the Big Three's introduction, and more specifically, Mirio's public execution of Class 1A. Well, all but one student, Katsuya, because he has danger sense and the speed to more than keep up with Mirio. So after he defeats Class 1A, he tries to take down Katsuya, but Katsuya shows he's not an amateur and says they may need experience, but I sure don't, punching Mirio, sending him flying back as Mirio gets up and they're about to keep fighting when Aizawa suddenly blows a whistle and says if they want to kill each other, it'll be on their own time. As Katsuya and Mirio both lose their smiles and dab each other up, with Mirio inviting Katsuya to intern with Sir Night-Eye. And surprisingly, Katsuya agrees to this, as following this, 2 days later, Katsuya's allowed to intern with Night-Eye, and he doesn't even give him the little stamp test, considering in every future that Sir Night-Eye looks into, Katsuya always gets it regardless. So after accepting him, he sends Mirio and Katsuya to do some patrolling, and on their patrolling, Eri runs into Katsuya, as he looks into the alleyway and sees Overhaul, who quickly begins to try to lie to Katsuya and Mirio, saying it's his daughter, but Katsuya doesn't buy it, and so tries to hold on to Eri. But once Eri feels Overhaul's killing intent, she runs to him scared for the heroes, as Katsuya says, hey wait, but Overhaul takes his glove off quickly and swipes at Katsuya, whose guard was down, and once he makes contact with Overhaul, he disassembles Katsuya, reverting the two back to their original states, as he takes off with Eri, creating a barrier of concrete, as he leaves and Mirio is left to rush Izuku and Bakugo to the hospital, where their families arrive, and upon seeing them, they cry in excitement and sadness. And Izuku and Bakugo would wake up, and once Bakugo sees Deku, he screams, damn Deku, what in the world happened? As their memories come flooding back, and Bakugo and Deku stay silent, as Izuku says, Bakugo, I'm sorry, how was I supposed to know that would happen if I touched you? And Bakugo would get up and say he took years of his life away, and Deku would ask for forgiveness, as from here, Bakugo would say, at least I have my quirk still, as he uses it, and it would be weaker than what he remembers as Katsuya, and Deku says, well, it's back to being basically quirkless, as he puts on some gloves so he doesn't fuse with anyone anymore. But as he does so, he decides that there's no harm in trying to use his quirk, and so he does so, as he would launch an explosion from his hand, and it would shock both Izuku and Bakugo, as they both think to use One for All simultaneously, and once they do, they realize that they do have access to it. However, they can only control 15% of it, seeing as they haven't trained their current bodies. And then Inko and Mitsuki would speak up, crying for joy and sadness, saying they'll miss Katsuya, but they're just so glad to have their boys back, as Deku and Bakugo look down in agreement, as they ask, what now? And Bakugo yells, he's not fusing again, so forget about it, being hit in the head by Mitsuki, as from here they remember Eri, and Mirio and Sir Night-Eye walk in asking if they want to help save Eri, and of course they agree. So they're made different hero costumes and they go along with the Overhaul raid, as they run through it defeating villain after villain, and they'd feel very weak, seeing as One for All ended up getting split between them, so they each only have 50% of it, and their explosion quirk is nothing like what it was with Katsuya, seeing as with Katsuya it was a 10 times multiplayer. But they keep it pushing nonetheless, and once they get to Overhaul, they both rush in and try to fight him, but they quickly realize that they can't keep up this way, and once Overhaul gets tired of dealing with them, he uses his full power form, grabbing both of them and telling them if they have any last words, as he begins to crush them slowly in his hands, and Bakugo looks to Izuku and says, damn it Deku, "We can't win like this." As he says, as much as he hates to admit it, he liked being fused. And Deku asks if he's sure, as Bakugo says, "It's the only way, Deku. Do it!" And Deku and Bakugo hold hands as they fuse into Katsuya with a blinding light, as from here they go on to punch Overhaul into the air and using 60% of One For All, shoot a massive explosion, defeating Overhaul, who barely survives the explosion. And from here they land and hug Eri, telling her he's so sorry he's late, as the attack would be over and the cleanup would take place, as Katsuya would go on and meet his parents and say, "It's good to be back," as the family has a huge family hug and Katsuya smiles, saying, "There's nothing like home." From here though, we have a short 9-month time skip, in which during this time, Shigaraki is broken out of prison with Kurogiri, and he goes on to defeat the Liberation Army, getting the surgery done on himself, as All For One's consciousness is transferred to Shigaraki's body, and a full power All For One attacks the school, along with an army of Nomus and an arsenal of new villains never seen before. But what this All For One didn't take into consideration is that Canon Izuku was able to keep up with Shigaraki, so a fusion of Deku and Bakugo, who is 10 times stronger, with access to a 10 times stronger One For All and access to 80% of his full power, would wipe the floor with him. And that's exactly what would happen. The second Katsuya sees this, he blitzes in and completely outspeeds All For One and launches a massive explosion, killing hundreds of high-end Nomus in one blast, as he turns to All For One, who uses Decay, but Katsuya completely bypasses it and sends him into the air using Black Whip, as he uses his newly acquired quirk Gear and Fajin to completely take his power to planetary level and blow this man to Kingdom Come, leaving no room for any type of healing to bring him back. And after the villains see this showcase, they straight up give up, and Katsuya 1 week later after cleanup would go on to graduate early and claim his spot as the new #1 hero of Japan.